In the beginning, we see a young woman, almost devoid of clothes, frantically dashing down the street. She seems to run away from something mysterious that is following her. Desperately seeking refuge, she rushes into her house, where her father looks at her with a puzzled expression. After a few minutes, she jumps into her car and heads to the beach. Later, at the beach, she calls her dad to tell him that she loves him. The next morning, the mutilated body of the girl is found on the very same beach. Well, very reminiscent of Jim Babe Candace from Final Destination 5. Then we follow Jay, a college student, relaxing in a jacuzzi, preparing herself for an evening date with her new boyfriend, Hugh. As she unwinds, her sister Kelly excitedly informs her that their friends, Paul and Yara, have invited them to join a movie night. Kelly encourages Jay to tag along, but Jay declines, explaining that she's going out. We see her friends briefly, and of course the only guy friend in the group seems to have a thing for Jay, so he doesn't seem too thrilled with the idea of Jay's upcoming date. As the evening unfolds, Jay and Hugh engage in a playful game. They take turns selecting a person from the crowd whom they secretly wish to trade places with, challenging each other to guess their chosen individual. When Hugh points towards a girl wearing a yellow dress, Jay glances at him with a perplexed expression, insisting that she doesn't see anyone matching that description. Hugh immediately grows increasingly anxious and suggests leaving. He continues to be aloof for the rest of their date. The next day, Jay decides to take a walk with Kelly. As they stroll together, Kelly notices that Jay seems a bit uneasy. She can tell that something is bothering her. It appears that Hugh is acting strangely. Jay wonders why Hugh would suddenly want to leave the theater so abruptly in the evening. Perhaps he saw his ex-girlfriend. The uncertainty gnaws at Jay. Later that evening, Jay meets up with her boyfriend once again. As their evening walk comes to an end, they find themselves in the car. They finally do the deed in the small, stinky car. However, after they are done, Hugh swiftly leaves the car to grab something, while Jay becomes distracted and starts talking about her childhood dreams. Little does she know, this diversion is exactly what Hugh had been waiting for. He attacks her from behind and incapacitates her, using chloroform to render her unconscious. When Jay eventually awakens, she finds herself in a wheelchair, trapped in an abandoned place. Her arms and legs are tightly bound, and Hugh is standing nearby. Confusion and fear grip her as she desperately asks him why he would do such a terrible thing to her. Hugh explains that he has been cursed, forced to see a creature that relentlessly pursues him. He has gotten the curse from a one-night stand. Terrifyingly, he reveals that during their intimate encounter, he had succeeded in passing this curse on Jay. The curse manifests in the form of a shape-shifting creature that can take any appearance it desires. Hugh explains to Jay that if the creature catches him, she too will meet a tragic end. He paused in his storytelling because he senses a presence near them. Together, they watch in disbelief as an unclothed woman rushes toward them. Immediately, Hugh pushes the wheelchair towards the car and continues his story. He warns that the creature can be seen anywhere, making it difficult to escape from its clutches. Hugh advises Jay to avoid rooms without emergency exits. To break the curse, she must sleep with someone, as the next victim could be Hugh again if it manages to kill Jay. Meanwhile, on the porch, Kelly, Paul, and Yara engage in a card game while discussing their teenage problems. Suddenly, the car comes to a halt in front of the house. Jay's boyfriend swiftly removes the exhausted girl from the car and hurries away. Shocked to see Jay partially undressed and with her hands tied, Kelly immediately dials the police. After the victim is interviewed, the officers thoroughly examine the scene. They discover that the man used a fake name and vanished without a trace. Overwhelmed by the ordeal, the girl falls into a state of depression. She refuses to eat and remains silent. A few days later, while Jay is sitting in a classroom, she notices an old woman in a hospital gown approaching their building through the window. The woman's slow movement captures Jay's attention, but she soon realizes that no one else can see her. Disturbed by the sight, Jay abruptly leaves the college premises. She heads to a cafe where Kelly and Paul work part-time. When she shares the story of the old woman in Hugh's tale, her sister dismisses it as mere fiction. Convinced that Jay has experienced a severe emotional shock, she believes that Jay's mind is playing tricks on her. Paul decides to spend the night at their house to offer support. Kelly suggests that Yara join them, and the girl agrees. As night falls, Paul and Jay sit in the living room, reminiscing about their childhood pranks. They also talk about their brief relationship where they had been each other's first kiss. Their relaxed conversation is abruptly interrupted by the sound of shattering glass. Paul heads to the kitchen to investigate, discovering that someone has broken a window and fled. Concerned, he goes to Kelly and urges her to call the police. Meanwhile, stupid Jay goes to inspect the kitchen and finds another unclothed, deformed woman who suddenly appears. She screams in terror. Startled, Jay races upstairs and locks the door. She only opens it after hearing Paul and Kelly. However, when there's another knock on the door a while later, she desperately asks her friends to not open it. They try to calm her down, and upon opening it, they realize it's just Yara. Or is it? Suddenly, Jay notices a tall, eyeless man approaching her and bolts out of the house screaming. Frantically, the girl jumps on a bicycle and rushes through the streets, skillfully avoiding obstacles in her path. Concerned for her well-being, the friends chase after her, realizing that she is completely losing her sense of reality. Eventually, they find her at an old playground. The commotion has attracted the attention of their attractive neighbor, Greg, who also joins the group. When Greg learns that someone has broken into Jay's house, he also joins them to help. Through their investigation, they discover the intruder's true identity, Jeff Redmond. Armed with this information, they locate Jeff's address and pay him a visit. When Jeff's mother answers the door, she calls for her son, who comes out to meet them. Jeff explains that the entity haunting them targets those who have had intercourse with its previous victims. He admits that he continues to see the entity, realizing that it hasn't forgotten about him either. Jeff offers Jay a solution, quickly passing on the curse by sleeping with someone else, thereby buying themselves some time. Convinced that the entity relentlessly pursues its victims, he suggests this as the only option. Jay feels disheartened and struggles to comprehend how to navigate this situation. Greg proposes a plan to seek refuge at his lakeside house, away from the city, to strategize their rescue mission. Arriving at the lakeside destination, the group settles into the house, making themselves at home. There, Greg teaches Jay how to use a gun, just in case. Paul, in the meantime, doesn't handle the presence of a potential threat to his love life that well. Several days pass, and while enjoying their time by the lakeshore, the creature assumes the form of Yara and slowly begins to attack Jay. Although her friends cannot see the creature, they witness Jay's hair standing on end and her body being violently pulled from side to side. Reacting instinctively, Paul hurls a chair at the entity, receiving an immediate retaliatory blow. Jay immediately runs away to the barn. Desperate to defend herself, Jay grabs a revolver and attempts to shoot the entity, but her efforts prove to be in vain. Trapped in the barn without an escape route, she succumbs to despair. Suddenly, the door shatters, revealing Greg, but he swiftly vanishes. Instead, the creature takes on the appearance of Jay's young neighbor, crawling through a hole. Overwhelmed, Jay panics, flees the barn, and jumps into a car, speeding off in an unknown direction. Struggling to control the vehicle, Jay veers off the road and crashes through a cornfield. She loses consciousness from the impact and only regains it in the hospital. In the evening, Greg pays a visit to Jay. Against his disbelief in the curse and the creature, he decides to lend a helping hand to Jay in his own way. Little does he know what awaits him. A few days pass, and he decides to visit Jay in the hospital. He reassures her that nothing strange has occurred during this time, filling her with a sense of relief. She clings to the hope that this nightmare will soon come to an end. After Jay is discharged from the hospital, she retreats into seclusion, choosing to keep to herself. One evening, while gazing absent-mindedly out the window, Jay catches sight of Greg. He approaches his house and attempts to open the door. When it stubbornly refuses to budge, he resorts to breaking a window with a stone, determined to gain entry. Jay's concern for her friend intensifies, compelling her to rush to his aid. She enters Greg's home and is startled to find the guy's mother standing before her son's room, incessantly knocking on the door. Something feels off about the woman, as her appearance seems unnaturally distorted. Jay realizes it isn't Greg's mother at all. It's the creature in disguise, attempting to lure the unsuspecting man out into the open. Filled with fear for her friend's safety, Jay desperately tries to warn Greg about the imminent danger. However, he remains oblivious and unknowingly opens the door. In an instant, the creature seizes the opportunity, forcefully shoving Greg inside and launching a ferocious attack. She sees the entity trying to sleep with a dead Greg. Overwhelmed by fear and shock, Jay hastily retreats to her car, desperate to escape the nightmare she has witnessed. She drives away, leaving the horrors of that night behind her. Once Greg's death sinks in, Jay comprehends the horrifying truth. The creature will resume its relentless pursuit of her. Determined to outwit her pursuer, she pushes herself to her limits, pressing onward. Finally, she reaches a point where she can go no further and falls asleep. Upon awakening, the girl retreats to her home, seeking safety. Then, one morning, Paul confesses his love for her and offers his assistance in breaking the curse. Reluctant to endanger Paul's life, Jay initially declines his proposal. Unfazed, Paul devises an alternative plan to kill the creature. Their new strategy involves luring the entity into the swimming pool and delivering an electric shock to neutralize it. Equipped with electrical appliances, the group prepares for the pivotal moment. After everything is set up, Jay bravely swims into the water, baiting the entity to spring the trap. Now they wait for it to arrive. To her dismay, the creature proves to be cunning. Understanding their bait, it retaliates by hurling objects at its prey, toppling Jay beneath the surface. Paul seizes the opportunity, raising a firearm to engage the creature. A stray bullet inadvertently strikes Yara, causing further chaos. With Jay's help to locate the creature, and after some struggle, the friends finally manage to cover the invisible entity with a white cloth. Then, determined to protect the girl, Paul steadies his aim and delivers a decisive shot. The bullet pierces the entity's skull, causing it to fall slowly into the water. Desperate, the creature grasps Jay's leg, but the timely follow-up shot from Paul grants her precious seconds to escape its clutches. As the creature vanishes, the pool is left with the horrifying aftermath, its once clear waters now tainted with blood. Back at home, Jay and Paul make love, hoping it will provide a means to eventually break the curse that has plagued her. Later, we find Paul looking at some prostitutes to probably pass on the curse on his way back. Days pass, and we see Yara recovering in the hospital. As the couple strolls along the street, intertwining their fingers casually, an eerie presence lurks in the shadows behind them. It still follows, and it will continue to do so.